45, 50, but you still love it, enjoy it, 100% like you start that thing.
It didn't arrive with a formal statement or staged photo op. There was no shared press event. No custom gloves flaunting to national flags. Instead, it came raw. Stripped of noise, just a 30-second video casually dropped on social media. No fanfare, no campaign, no hints, just the crisp crack of leather on mitts, echoing like gunshots. And there he was, Manny Pacquiao, at 46, moving like time hadn't touched him. The clip didn't beg for attention, didn't scream come back, didn't drop a name. But it didn't need to, because when Manny moves like that, the sport pays attention whether it's ready or not. The silence around that video became deafening. Fans lit up the comments, analysts slowed it down frame by frame. Retired legends gave silent nods with fire and fist emojis. And hanging like a ghost in every reply thread was one named Canelo Alvarez, not because Manny called him out, not because there was a tag, but because when greatness stirs like that, it pulls gravity, especially toward whoever's on top. Canelo didn't reply, didn't flinch, didn't blink publicly, but something in the air shifted, because in this game, the biggest messages don't always come with words. Canelo Alvarez isn't someone who gets rattled easily. His reputation is carved from restraint, from knowing when to speak, when to strike, and when to stay silent in waves that hit harder than any insult. He's endured wild face-offs, relentless trash talkers, and waves of online taunts, all with barely a blink. But this wasn't just more background noise. The Pacquiao video felt different. It wasn't loud or theatrical. It didn't try to trend, and maybe that's why it landed so heavily. For a man like Canelo, who's mastered every shade of modern boxing, from sharp counters to ruthless bodywork, what he saw wasn't a memory lane moment. It was a signal. The movement, the snap in Manny's punches, the rhythm in his feet, it wasn't a tribute to the past. It was a declaration of presence. A silent message only true warriors can decipher. The fire is still there. And that's why, even without a single word, the moment felt deeply personal. Because for someone like Canelo, who trains at high altitude, who lives in the gym even between camps, who obsesses over every detail and statistic, watching a 46-year-old legend still throw punches like he's fighting his own shadow, that's not admiration. That hits like a shock to the system. The kind of jolt that makes even the most focused champions question their own limits. The kind you can't look away from. Whether Canelo said anything out loud didn't matter, because the boxing world had already started speaking for him, in whispers, in comparisons, and in a silence that felt less like respect and more like stunned awe.
Official weight 145 3/4 pounds. His professional record, 50 victories, including 38 knockouts.
In a sport fueled by noise, where every clean shot becomes a quote, and every round sparks a headline, Canelo's silence after watching Pacquiao wasn't empty. It was intentional. There was no promo tour behind this, no grudge match to hype, just raw footage from a man who, by all logic, should have slowed down long ago. And that's precisely why it landed like a punch. Pacquiao's movement didn't impress, for his age it impressed. Full stop. His sharpness wasn't nostalgia, it was presence. For active fighters still chasing their place in the sport, it felt like a warning. Some legends never retire, they simply become the atmosphere. You don't see them, but they're always there. Canelo, usually the benchmark everyone else is measured by, was now being quietly compared to something far less quantifiable. Not a title, not a stat, but a fire. Watching Pacquiao unleash combos with the same wild intensity he showed in his prime wasn't about dream matchups. It was about who still breathes boxing like oxygen, who wakes up like they've never made it. That was the real message, and even though Canelo didn't comment, didn't post, didn't even blink publicly, fans noticed. The silence spoke volumes. Manny's clip didn't just go viral, it shifted something. Suddenly, Canelo's non-response became the loudest noise in the sport. There's a strange gravity to that kind of quiet. When someone at the very top doesn't react to a moment, that sets the fight world buzzing. It doesn't read as disinterested. Feels strategic, like he's absorbing, studying, rewinding, not out of fear, but recognition. Because what Pacquiao showed wasn't polish, it was timing. And at his age, That kind of timing doesn't come from routine. It's born from obsession. For someone like Canelo, who has engineered a career on calculated mastery, seeing that kind of raw, loose, dangerous movement can do more than raise eyebrows. It can trigger memory. The memory of when boxing wasn't business, it was compulsion. When fights weren't content, they were identity. Maybe that's why Canelo said nothing, because there was nothing left to add. Maybe his reply came in extra rounds, a longer run, more hours logged behind closed doors. A quiet nod between warriors from different eras, because that video wasn't aimed at anyone. It didn't need to be. It wasn't a call out, it was a reminder. Greatness doesn't disappear. It evolves. It sweats. It endures. And somewhere in that stillness, Canelo might have offered the purest response of all without...
Encouraged by Manny Pacquiao in this fourth round, under a minute left. And there Pacquiao lands the combination.
And that's what fans couldn't let go of. It wasn't about what Canelo said. It was the silence. The man who usually defines the narrative, whose name alone commands attention and pay-per-view numbers, suddenly wasn't leading the story, not because he slipped, not because someone passed him, but because a legend from another era showed the world what true, unfiltered hunger still looks like, the kind that doesn't need contracts, belts, or build-up. Just sweat, repetition, and a will that refuses to fade. And when that level of intensity hits the internet, it doesn't just go viral, it hits nerves. And even a champion like Canelo, dominant, polished, and calculated, gets caught in the shadow. If only for a moment, when Pacquiao throws down the gauntlet with nothing but a heavy bag and a clip, the murmurs grew louder. Could Canelo still move like that at 46? Would he even try? Maybe that's why he kept quiet, not from arrogance, but from introspection. Because when someone with zero left to prove is still grinding like a rookie, it forces you to take inventory of your own hunger. Fans weren't expecting trash talk or rivalry, they wanted evidence. Proof that someone still at the top of the sport cared as deeply as the man who'd already carved his name into history. So Canelo's silence, interpreted a dozen different ways, spoke volumes. It didn't scream conflict. It whispered reverence. Sometimes, when greatness enters the room, you don't answer, you absorb. You study, you respect it without fanfare. Because even the most iconic fighters know when another lion is near, and true champions know when it's time to listen, not lead. In some ways, that's exactly what made it hit harder. There was no official tie between them. No training announcement, no session footage, not even a blurry selfie from the same gym. Just whispers, fan theories, and timelines lit up with speculation. That's the power of a moment like this. It generates electricity without needing a spark. Pacquiao didn't have to stand beside Canelo. All he had to do was showcase what real grind still looks like. And in doing so, he unintentionally challenged the sport to look at its current champions under a new lens. This wasn't about stats or accomplishments. It was about rhythm, hunger, and motion. When a 46-year-old can shake up the fight world with a third-a-second clip, it's not nostalgia, it's a reality check. And Canelo, whether he planned to or not, found himself swept into that conversation. In a boxing scene where noise often outshouts skill, where social media barks louder than footwork, Pacquiao reminded everyone what the foundation really is: sweat, tempo, obsession. And in doing so, he put every active fighter, especially the elite, on silent notice. There were no insults, no names dropped, but the message was clear. So when fans imagined what Canelo might have thought after seeing that footage, they weren't waiting for a tweet, they weren't checking headlines. They were searching for the subtle things: a change in his training clips, a pause in his demeanor, maybe a quiet shift behind closed doors. Maybe he just muttered a low damn. Maybe he didn't say anything, but the fact that fans are still wondering what that moment stirred in him, that's proof enough that what Pacquiao did wasn't just training, it was disruption. The kind that lingers, the kind that hits home.
Combo.
Yep. Goes to the flurry again. Yep.
Boxing doesn't always need promotion when the performance speaks for itself. And that's exactly what happened here. Manny Pacquiao wasn't moving like a retired legend brushing off ring rust. He didn't carry the energy of a veteran staying loose. He looked like a threat, a question no one wanted to answer. Like time was on his heels, and he still had the legs to outrun it. That ignited something instinctive not just in the crowd, but in the competition. Canelo Alvarez has long held the crown as the sport's gold standard, the one everyone else chases, but suddenly, someone older, lighter, and supposedly finished reminded the world what greatness looked like before the lights, and followers when it was born in silence, built in sweat, and carried in solitude. That kind of energy isn't easily brushed aside, even by a reigning champion. So maybe Canelo's lack of response wasn't dismissal, it was acknowledgement. Or maybe, at a deeper level, it was recalibration, because witnessing that kind of focus, that intensity born not from obligation, but obsession, forces you to reevaluate your own why, the titles, the headlines, the endorsements. None of it carries weight if you've lost touch with the raw grind. That got you there. That's what Manny exposed, not just motion, but meaning. And that's why, without ever tagging him, the world looks straight at Canelo. Because when a fighter at 46 still moves like he's got everything to prove, it forces every active contender to question what they'll become when the noise dies down. Manny Pacquiao didn't step in the ring with Canelo Alvarez, but somehow, he still landed a shot that made its mark. What made it powerful was its silence. No promotional posters, no confrontational stares, no artificial hype, just a single, unfiltered moment that sliced through the noise and spoke directly to boxing's soul. Manny Pacquiao didn't have to announce a comeback or hint at a big-name rematch. All it took was 30 seconds of razor-sharp rhythm and laser focus to remind everyone that real greatness doesn't shout, it just steps in, laces up, and flows like it never left. And when it does, fighters everywhere don't feel threatened, they feel awakened, a jolt back to what the sport once demanded, and maybe what it's been missing. Canelo, long seen as the sport's ultimate technician and silent assassin, isn't one for theatrics. He keeps his energy for the canvas. But even his resolve has to pause when someone like Pacquiao makes noise with motion, not words. That's what struck hardest, not the nostalgia, but the standard. Whether Canelo responds or stays silent doesn't really matter now. The message was already delivered. The benchmark didn't rise, it returned. It snapped back to that raw, old-school foundation built on footwork, discipline, and the echo of punches chasing something pure. And in that moment, even boxing's most dominant star had to feel it settle into the air. Because legacy isn't only forged in title bouts, it's shaped in the unseen hours. When the lights fade but the grind continues, that's what Pacquiao delivered. No spotlight, no entourage, just raw intention. And that's the one thing Canelo couldn't overshadow, not with accolades, pay-per-view records, or pound-for-pound clout. When that clip surfaced, it wasn't about stats, it cut deeper, exposing a relentless devotion to the craft itself. Whether Canelo took it as a challenge, a salute, or a silent signal, there was no denying the impact. He felt it. You don't dominate boxing without sensing danger when it rolls in. And what Pacquiao dropped wasn't a breeze, it was a storm surge. In that instant, Canelo stopped being the main act, he became the reflection. Fans didn't ask what Pacquiao's training meant for his own path, they asked what it revealed about Canelo's now. That's what made this moment surreal. One man releases a quiet training snippet, and suddenly the sport's reigning king gets drawn into the spotlight without lifting a glove. That's not hype, it's gravity, and Pacquiao, intentionally or not, reminded everyone that even from the sidelines, his presence still bends the sport's narrative, pulling its brightest stars into his orbit. For someone like Canelo, being the gravitational center of boxing is the norm. He's usually the one who sets the tempo, deciding who's in the spotlight, when the narrative unfolds, and when it ends. But this time, he wasn't the origin, he was the aftershock. And that shift didn't go unnoticed. It wasn't about Manny Pacquiao booking a fight or chasing headlines. It was about presence, about the way he moved with zero noise. Zero need for validation, just movement that spoke louder than most entire fight cards. In a sport where identity often gets tangled in marketing and manufactured beef, that kind of purity hits hard. No one's questioning Canelo's greatness, his resume stands on its own. He's still top tier, still dominating in ways most fighters only dream of. But Pacquiao's quiet statement revealed something deeper, a reminder that the essence of boxing isn't just about control or marketability. It's about intention, soul, that intangible layer that can't be engineered, only felt. And that feeling, it sparked something in everyone, fans, analysts, even rivals. The buzz wasn't who's next for Canelo, it was is the fire. Still there, in under a minute, Pacquiao shifted the conversation from spectacle to substance. And in that silence, even Canelo was pulled into the reflection.
Round 10?
Round 10 on.
Maybe the brilliance wasn't in the video itself, but in the ripples it caused. Pacquiao didn't have to call out Canelo, didn't need to collaborate or even drop a name. All it took was motion, pure, focused, unrelenting. That was enough. Without a word, he ignited whispers across the boxing world. What must Canelo be thinking? Suddenly, the quiet became deafening, and Pacquiao, simply by putting in the work, placed Canelo back under the microscope, because that's what happens when legacy refuses to settle into history. Instead of fading, it moves, alive and undeniable. Pacquiao didn't demand attention. He commanded it. He didn't ask to be compared. He simply reminded everyone that greatness doesn't vanish. When the titles stop, it evolves. Canelo has conquered doubters, unified belt, and built an empire with his hands and discipline. But now, the boxing community is weighing him against something less tangible, not a comeback, but a presence. That clip didn't shake rankings, it stirred the air, and within that shift, Canelo's silence said more than words ever could. It wasn't passivity, it was reverence, for a moment, for a legacy, for something rare. No matter how high you climb, there's something haunting about watching a fighter chase perfection when he no longer has to. That's what Manny did. He didn't return for a title shot or a paycheck. He returned to remind everyone, including the champions, what obsession looks like, what mastery looks like. And in that reminder, he peeled back the polished surface of modern boxing and exposed its heart. That wasn't a performance, that was purpose, sharpened and precise. It wasn't flashy, it was elemental, the kind of movement that makes you stop and ask yourself if you're still pushing hard enough, even at the top. So when Canelo didn't rush to respond, didn't jump on social media, that wasn't a missed opportunity, it was intentional. Because there are moments in this sport that don't need analysis or banter, they need silence, reflection, and Pacquiao gave him, and all of us, that moment. The kind that makes even the most confident champions pause, not from insecurity, but from awe. Canelo's reputation wasn't bruised, it was baptized again, reintroduced to what hunger looks like when nothing's on the line but pride. And maybe that's the truest form of respect, to watch without speaking. To recognize another great not through headlines, but through stillness. Pacquiao didn't demand a place in today's fight scene. He took it, not with force, but with rhythm. And that rhythm echoed far beyond the gym walls. It carved space inside Canelo's legacy. Not as a rival, but as a mirror, not to dethrone, but to remind. The king didn't flinch. He watched. He respected. And in that pause, in that quiet, two eras met without needing a single word.